Now
Mr.
for
Chairman.
your 5 minutes of questioning.
Thank you so much. Mr. Chairman, white supremacy and other extremist movements thrive in social media spaces in part because algorithms drive user engagement, which promotes increasingly extreme content. The Senate Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee recently found that most recent acts of political violence in the United States are committed by people who do not belong to any formal organization, but were instead radicalized online through social media and streaming platforms, gaming sites, and blogs. And social media is being maliciously used to normalize extremism. Hitler, Nazis, and Holocaust denial were all trending on Twitter after we saw the mainstreaming of it by cultural, political, and even sports icons. Mr. Siegel, can you shed light on the link between hate spread on these platforms and hate-fueled messaging and violence that we see in our committees, like, for example, in the Nazi and racist messages recently and repeatedly spray-painted across parts of my own hometown of Weston? In other words, how does virtual hate turn into physical or real-life hate?
Thank you for the question. I think we need to understand these virtual spaces as the lifeblood of extremism. Over and over, we see how the ability for people to reach, recruit, and radicalize in these spaces has actually animated real-world activity. Now, this is true for the violent extremism that we've seen, where people have referenced previous shooters, their online manifestos, their online footprints, but also for some of the more day-to-day, if you will, types of activities. So ADL has tracked over 5,000 white supremacist propaganda incidents over the last several years. Year over year, it's increasing. Where is this propaganda created? It is created in online spaces, leveraged amongst people who share it, and then shows up on the ground. There is a direct pipeline between the hate that is incubated in these online spaces and the impact that it has on the communities on the ground. And frankly, one last point is that many of these individuals are actually live streaming their activity on the ground in real time, knowing that there are people sitting in the comfort of their own homes around the world who are encouraging them to harass people on the ground in real time. Anti-Semitism, white supremacy, other forms of hatred have become a form of entertainment, and they are spread to viewers across various platforms, and that's one of the concerns that we have for even more violence in the future.
Thank you. And just a follow-up question. How do mainstream social media sites like Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube allow extremist movements to radicalize those who might not otherwise be exposed to this extremist white supremacy messaging?
So certainly the algorithms on many of these platforms where they drive people to, basically spend more time on these platforms require even more and more sort of extreme sort of content. But in addition, we have noticed by design tactics by white supremacists and other extremists to not necessarily rely on terrible content for fear that they may be taken down, or often not, but actually using in their handles, in their profiles, links to other platforms that are much more permissible in terms of the hate and violence that they will allow. And so it's using the wide reach of Twitter and YouTube and Facebook in order to drive individuals into more fringe spaces where there are even more concentrated echo chambers of hate.
Thank you. In September, the Interparliamentary Task Force to Combat Online Anti-Semitism, which I co-chair, held a hearing with parliamentarians from around the world. We confronted social media representatives on their lack of action to prevent radicalization and regulate hate speech. This was before Elon Musk opened the floodgates on content regulation. Ms. Caraballo, what tools or tactics do sites like Twitter and Facebook possess to stop or blunt their algorithms that fuel radicalization of anti-Semitic or racist content?
Thank you, Representative, for the question. In particular, these sites have the ability to minimize the ability for negative emotional content to spread by the algorithms. The algorithms rely on engagement and oftentimes can detect certain types of sentiment, and oftentimes that's used to promote certain types of content. Additionally, advertisers, and particularly political advertisers, may seek to raise negative engagement, particularly around certain content targeting particular minority groups. In particular, in my testimony, I cited the use of the Daily Wire constantly advertising around anti-trans content. And so that then gets promoted and reinforced. And additionally, one of the things to also note is the ability for more contextual content moderation that looks at the ways that targeted harassment on the basis of identity is perpetrated because it is a constant moving target and is very difficult, in particular, to always know what is being used in that context. Thank you.
Thank you. I know I'm out of time, Mr. Chairman, but we have to address how social media fuels extremism. It can't function as an extremist recruitment tool, and we have to make sure that there is moderation of toxic rhetoric that leads to actual violence, and it must, because it's seen as good for business, but it's not good for the health of our civic spaces. And we have to make sure that we address it. Thank you so much. I yield back.
Thank you very much, and I hope that's something